So we're missing our beautiful moderator, Dion Jennings, because she is on holidays. And these are summer pop-ups. So with the pop-ups, you're not going to get all of us present because some of us will be away or some of us will be taking some time off. And yeah, sometimes you might have 2 herbalists, sometimes you might have 3. But keep your eye on the Facebook page, Herbalists and Herbs, because we will be announcing all the pop-ups on that page. And if you haven't liked that page, like it, and you'll get all the information you need. My name is Abra Arneson, so I'm just going to jump right in. I'm a clinical herbalist. My practice is in Ottawa and in the Gatineau Hills. In my home is Gatineau Hills, and the clinic I work at is in Ottawa. So I work by Zoom. I see some people in my home, but mostly I see people in person in Ottawa, by Zoom in my home. I'm a writer. I've been writing a lot during COVID and really enjoying that. And my garden is doing better than any other year because I have more time for it. So I'm really happy about that. And yeah, so that's what I have to share. Oh, and I'm supposed to say something about holistic medicine, and I get to speak first, so I get the easiest thing to say. So for me, and I'm sure my fellow herbalists agree with this, and this is all I'll say, holistic medicine is about relationships. And there's always that expression, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, but you have to be working with the parts. In holistic medicine is more like a verb for me than a noun. It's more like a play between relationships as opposed to a modality. Yeah. So that's all I have to say. Tamara.
Okay, just unmuted myself. I didn't know I was next. Okay, so yeah, I'm Tamara Siegel. I'm a herbalist with a practice here at my farm in Prince Edward County, Ontario. And my gardens are, I was just saying, they're pretty wild because I like a lot of the wild plants and they're the ones that I harvest for medicines in my practice. But I'm also growing a whole bunch of potatoes and a whole bunch of like chamomile, which is cultivated, and some beautiful angelica plants that are new to the game. Yeah, my ideas about holistic medicine, I guess, that I'm always sort of working with in my practice and in my teaching, because I teach classes here at the farm as well, are really, I think it always kind of comes around to the idea of the microcosm and the macrocosm, and really on all these different levels, there are patterns that are present creating the same sort of story in a way. And so you can learn about a person's wellness by looking at the patterns of, you know, looking at their face and their skin and what shows up there, by hearing the stories about their life and the patterns that happen to them in their life, and about the symptoms that they have and the history of that. And you'll often find threads where there's a connection of, oh, there's some sort of underlying thing that's always sort of there, or always maybe a little out of balance, always needing to work itself out. And so on some level, I'm always looking at that and looking for those patterns on really a whole bunch of different levels. And then they show up also in the plants that we work with. So that gives us clues as to which medicines we might use. And so, and you can just keep going and going, looking into that deeper and deeper. So that's sort of what I'll put in there.
Great, Tamara. Okay, Victor.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Victor. I am herbalist based in Toronto, and my roots are in traditional Western herbal medicine, but I have, I draw from other traditions as well, including Ayurvedic medicine, a little bit of Tibetan medicine, and I practice a system of rehabilitative healing originating in India called Marmanati Chikitsa. In terms of holistic medicine and what holistic medicine entails for me, well, one of the things that I want to discuss further tonight is this notion of praxis And, praxis doesn't simply mean practice, it means the relation between theory and practice. And that relation, I think, is very important when it comes to determining what clinical work actually looks like, what relating to patients actually looks like, what relating to the wider ecological matrix of the planet actually looks like. And so, yeah, I want to, we'll explore this notion of praxis and what it entails tonight, and how our praxis ultimately shapes the ways in which we conceive of health and the disease process, and what those things actually, how those things can actually be managed.
Great. Thank you, Victor. Okay, Marianne.
Hi, I'm a herbalist that lives in Peterborough. I have a clinic here, and I do some teaching, and I make medicine. And this is a very busy time of year. All of us herbalists are kind of crazy with gardening and harvesting, and everything's growing really quickly, and life is just very busy. And it's wonderful. I'm going to talk today about holism in relationship to the parts of ourselves and how we can approach healing from those, just the concept of the different aspects of ourselves. And I won't get too deep into it now, but that's what I was going to speak about today.
Great. Thanks, Marianne. And Penny. Penny, you need to unmute. Oh, Penny, yeah, watch it now. Okay, great.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yep.
Great. Welcome, everyone. So my name is Penelope Boudreau. I am a registered herbalist as well. So for the past 23, 24 years, I've had the honor to work every day with herbal plants and herbal medicine, which I'm so grateful. But my true love is working with plants here at home and growing. I cannot grow enough. It's like plant, 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 grow, 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 water, water, water. And I love it. And I just really want to try to make everyone fall in love with that whole concept of planting and planting more, and especially endangered and at-risk plants. So I'm hoping you'll catch the fever. But I wanted to just touch on for a moment, I read about the World Health Organization redefined, and I'm just going to read here for you what they defined health as. Because health used to be, a lot of people would think it is the absence of disease, but that is not what health is. And it's not found at the bottom of a tincture bottle or a capsule bottle either. So the WHO defined it really well, and they said it is a state of physical, mental, and social well-being. And that really sums up what holistic medicine is. It is the whole, it is all those things. We're like this puzzle, and all our pieces fit just so that we can be at our very best and our optimal. So really, it's even discovering yourself, knowing where your little chinks in your armor are, and to try to always build that up and make it strong. So I'd really like to encourage that for everyone. And I'm going to take a moment and draw from these Whispering Woods cards that I had. And Audra said it to me earlier when I asked, do you think I should read these? And she was saying how it really is another tool. We have all these little tools to help our health. And so by just drawing a card and even reading it, maybe something resonates with you. And I'll just draw one for the group and we'll see what it says tonight. It says growth. The tallest oak tree once started as a seedling. Don't be afraid to start something new. So it's just really great. So think about that, growth. The tallest oak tree once started as a seedling. Don't be afraid to start something new. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Penny. Okay, so now we have to, because Penny insists on a joke, to open up our evening, our webinars. So here's this webinar's joke. So I have a problem in my garden. And that problem is I can never get red tomatoes. I grow these great big tomatoes, but they always stay green. And so I end up making all this relish. And the whole time I'm making relish, I resent these green tomatoes, which is not a great place to be when you're making relish. So my neighbor has the most beautiful, luscious red tomatoes. So I said to her, "Hey, Sandra, how do you grow those red tomatoes?" She said, "It's really easy. Most people don't know that tomatoes have eyes and they can see in the dark. So what you do is you go out at night, take off all your clothes, and dance around the tomatoes naked. And the tomatoes will blush. And in the morning, you'll wake up and you'll have these nice red plump tomatoes." So I'm thinking, okay, like I can go pretty far out there. Like a lot of people think of me as pretty out there. This is really out there. But hey, what the heck? You know, what's the worst? I dance in the moonlight naked, right? So off I go. I go out there, take off my clothes. The moon's down. It's beautiful. No bugs. Dancing naked around the tomatoes, having a lovely time. Finish, go back into the house, have a great sleep, wake up in the morning, go out to see my red tomatoes. They were still green, but the cucumbers had grown 4 inches. Okay. I warned you, that was the best joke yet. Okay. Okay, so now let's get serious about holistic medicine here. Okay, so from a herbalist point of view, like we're not only talking about holistic medicine in terms of the body and relationships and all that, we also want to talk about holistic medicine in terms of the plants. So I want to pick a controversial topic among herbalists to show how we have to think, how herbalists think holistically about the plants, just as we think holistically about the body, the mind, the spirit, the environment. So there's a lot of talk right now about PAs, and PAs are pyrolyzine alkaloids. And some of the talk is coming out of Great Britain, where they're talking about banning all plants that contain PAs. Now, pyrolyzine alkaloids, okay? So just to put that in context, there are over 600 different PAs that have been discovered so far. And we know of 6,000 plants that contain PAs. So this is a huge class of plant constituents. And a huge amount of plants use these constituents as their medicine. So some of the concerns about PAs are very real, and they are, there is evidence, clear evidence that some PAs in some plants can be harmful. PAs can definitely damage the liver. They basically clog up the blood drainage system of the liver, which is not good. They also can create tumors within the liver. So PAs are not something that, you want to be really casual with, like, volatile oils or flavonoids. A herbalist needs to be aware of that component of PAs, that they can present a toxicity to the body and can do harm. And we do no harm in our medicine. We take that very seriously. We don't kind of go, oh yeah, but it's better than what it was before. We don't do that one. We go, no, we practice no harm. So, and PAs are also found in a lot of grains, in milk and eggs. So these plant constituents are all over the place. We're eating them all the time. So when we're looking at medicine, we have a lot of control over those PAs, the amount of PAs in the medicine, and how we use that medicine, as well as the person we're giving that medicine to. So I just want to give you an idea of how we think of these constituents in a holistic manner. So first of all, they are alkaloids, and plants that grow in the shade, or say there's a bunch of leaves and there's other leaves that are growing in the shade of the upper part of the plants, the part of the plants or the plant that is growing in the shade will make a lot less alkaloids, a lot less pyrrolizing alkaloids. So if we collect our medicine from plants in the shade, there'll be less pyrrolizing alkaloids to create a toxicity. Okay, also watering your plants, a lot of rain, it will create more PAs, more pyrrolizing alkaloids, because what pyrrolizing alkaloids are is it's the plant's insecticide. Insects take the nectar or nibble on the leaf of the plant, they take in the PAs and they die. So they don't like the taste of the PAs, they go away. Everybody knows when it's wetter, there's more insects. Just come and hang out in these woods with me. You'll notice that there's rain, more insects. So rain creates more PAs in the plants because there's more insects. The next thing is insects like flowers, and they also like young leaves. So there tends to be more PAs in flowers and in younger parts of the growth of the plant. So big older leaves, there's fewer PAs than in the upper parts where the leaves are much more tender and easier for the insects to eat. So a herbalist, during a dry spell, can gather older leaves that are a little more in the shade of the plant, and they'll have less PAs. Okay, and also a lot of times roots are higher in PAs because the roots have all that bacteria and all that stuff that's going on in the soil. So it's again part of the plant's immune system to keep that plant strong, you know, and so it's not being attacked by a lot of things that are under the ground and want to eat at the roots. So roots tend to be higher in PAs as well. So right off the top, the herbalist says, okay, I want to use this plant. I know it's high in PAs, but I'm going to harvest older parts. I'm going to also harvest when it's dry, and I'm going to look for the parts in the shade. Okay, I got my 2-minute thing going. Okay, so the another thing, when we're making our medicine, we can use different solvents to extract more PAs or less PAs. So alkaloids aren't really very high extraction in water. So if we make medicine as a tea with plants in PAs, we're not going to do as much harm as if we use a high alcohol proof tincture or apple cider vinegar, which is your classic for extracting alkaloids. So even if you decide you want to make a borage flower tea and you're thinking, oh, there's more PAs in the flower than anywhere else, you're still fine because the water doesn't extract the PAs the same way as an alcohol or a vinegar would. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to consider the person you're giving the medicine to. So let's talk about Comfrey. Comfrey's high in PAs. You have an 18-year-old guy, you know, and he's snowboarding and he breaks his leg in 3 places. He's really healthy. He doesn't really drink. He's like, you know, strong, very athletic. You're thinking, you know, this guy would benefit from drinking comfrey leaf tea for like a month to help heal up these 3 breaks. I would have no problem with that. Absolutely no problem, because I'm not dealing with a compromised liver, and I'm also dealing with someone who has a strong constitution. Now, what I could do with that tea is I could put some dandelion leaf and some dandelion root in that tea to help the liver deal with the PAs. Okay, time's up. So I just want you to know how herbalists kind of like do that whole big picture when they look at a plant and they know there's something in the plant that's a challenge, but they have all these ways of playing with that plant in a holistic way, understanding the relationship of that plant to create good medicine. So does anyone have any comments, any questions or comments? I know I kind of like threw a whole pile of information out there. No? Okay, let's move on then. Marianne.
Oh, I'm next. Okay. Yeah, so I'm taking a little bit of a different leaning than Abra is talking about in terms of working holistically. I wanted to talk about more about the aspects of ourself. We live in this dominant culture that really wants to kind of separate things and chop things up in little bits to understand them. And there's something that we can learn from taking things apart to understand them. And but really in holism, we have to be able to bring things back together. So we often talk about our physical self, our emotional self, our mental self, our spiritual self. And the idea that I wanted to get across is that those things are so intertwined and interwoven that they're not actually separate. Like you can talk about your physical self, but it's not actually separate from your spiritual self or your mental self or your emotional self. And that can be a hard concept to get to sometimes, though, because we have these different words, and when we have a different word, it delineates it from something separate, and we want to separate it in our mind. But in terms of holism, we really are together. So if you want to do physical healing, like it's not separate from spiritual healing. And to me, like working with plants and working with a herb is also like, it might have physical repercussions, but it's also like a spiritual endeavor. It's like an act that is connecting you with nature in a way that's very holistic. So in the way I would view it in working with individuals in this capacity would be to not see them as separate, to know that there's like layers and layers that are all intertwined, and you can use a technique that might be viewed as physical, but it can also have an impact on those other, what we call separate bodies. And I guess I kind of see it as being, there's many roads to get into healing, and it doesn't have to just be one way. And so if somebody is having difficulty with something, a particular way of using a plant, there might be another way of using it that can address something, you know. So we tend to think of, say, flower essences as being working on more spiritual levels, but they can have very real physical implications when you use those things, even though you might not see like the chemical constituents in that flower essence. It can still help the body in a physical way, help to alleviate physical symptoms. And, you know, just coming at it from a personal perspective in my own healing, I've had profound results physically on using techniques that are viewed as being more spiritual techniques, and vice versa. So I think that we can limit ourselves sometimes by thinking that, you know, I have a physical problem, I have to address it in a physical way, and so on. But there's many doors into the healing realm is what I see. And it gives us a lot of room to work with ourselves or with other people from the place where they the door that they want to open, you know, the place where they want to enter the healing. My journey has taken me to alchemy and spagyrics, and in that realm, in that way of working with plants, there is an aspect where we do take things apart, even like are taking aspects of the plant part, like the different constituents, but to make a whole medicine, you're always putting it back together. And I think in our history, we've come through a place where we've done things like take things apart, you know, we're taking apart, you know, we dissect the body to learn about it. We dissect plants, and we're looking at things in smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, looking at the atoms and like everything that in the smallest piece that we can. But we also see how when we isolate those really small pieces and not use the whole being, the whole plant, it has problems. You know, when we work with medications in the pharmaceutical industry, we're often seeing side effects because it's not addressing the body in a whole way. It's taking a little piece of something and trying to address something that's whole. So we often see side effects. So for me in herbalism, it's more about allowing like the person who walks through the door to be their whole self and introduce themselves to me as their whole self, and not seeing it as separate. So if they have a sore knee, it's part of who they are in all ways. And I think that there's an honoring in that. Like we're honoring the human, or we're honoring the spirit in the person. We're honoring the earth when we really like look at it. But it's like we're meeting each other as whole. And the more and part of my own journey in herbalism is to try and be my whole self and like bring back those pieces of myself that were lost somewhere along the way, you know, and become whole myself in order to meet the plant as a whole being or meet the person as a whole being, and just encourage that, continue to encourage holism. And I also think that in our society, we're really come to a lot of unwellness because of everything separated. And that disjointedness of not being able to be our whole selves is causing a lot of problems for us. And so I think in what we do, we can bring it back and encourage. It's like a returning to ourselves, a returning to home. And I guess that's what I'll say about that.
Beautiful, beautiful, Marianne. Hey, you know what I always say to people is, they say to, you know, when people say to you, oh yeah, you know, do you think it's all in my head? I'll say, or, you know, a doctor says, oh, it's all in your head, or someone says, I always go, wow, your head's attached to your body, you know. Like, it's like, yeah, it's not different than your body. Yeah. So
yeah, and I think anybody who does trauma work will know that the body stores trauma in various places, right? It's not just, you know. Anyways, does anybody else have any comments?
Seems like
I had a comment. I thought it was interesting when you. Oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Penny.
Sorry. Okay. When you were saying about being whole, for a person to become whole, and I think sometimes people even have to understand, sometimes you have to even move from where you live to be able to be whole, or to be who you really are supposed to be. Sometimes your surrounding holds you back from who you really are and your ultimate life. And sometimes you need to just be brave and move where there's like-minded people and be able to express yourself and live wholly that way.
Mm-hmm. 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 Tamara, you wanted to share something?
Oh yeah, well, I was just thinking, you know, when Marianne was talking about flower essences and how they can have a physical effect, not just a mental, emotional effect. I think sometimes the only way that a physical ailment can actually move is if something emotional moves, or something, you know, mental, emotional. That was how Dr. Buck came to the Buck flower essences, because he realized he wasn't getting the same results with all of his patients, as far as I understand that story. Some of them just weren't healing when given the protocols that they had, they should have. And he realized, no, because there's something on this other level that we're not addressing, and it's creating physical blockages. So healing can be ineffective if it's not really addressed holistically. And sometimes you might be focusing in on something and not realize that you're really honing in, and you're not maybe taking into account some of the peripheral stuff that might play a pretty important role. So then, it can be like a good reminder, let's step back and look at some of this other stuff. And maybe there's something else that needs to shift first on a different level.
Yeah, sometimes I find too that what's missed is what the gifts are that the person carries, and they're spending so much time focusing on the illness and the challenges that they're forgetting they're a whole person who carries gifts and talents and love and joy and beauty. And a lot of times connecting with those aspects of one's being brings great health. So yeah. Anyone else? Okay, let's go to Victor.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I guess, I'll start with this point that Marianne made about cutting things up. We have this lineage, this scientific lineage starting around the time of the European Enlightenment, where objectivity and truth became associated with calculation, measurement, and number. And this led to many of us perceiving the world as a collection of independent and isolated events and processes. And when we fall into this trap, we fail to see how nature is a whole, including a failure to see how the body is a complex ecological system that relates and interfaces with the complex ecological matrix called the Earth. And so when this view of the whole is lost, our conceptions of health and the corresponding treatments of disease that we rely upon necessarily suffer a great loss. So one of the things that we do in herbal medicine is we reject this view of isolated, independent parts that have no relation to each other. And instead, we adopt a view of a kind of dynamic totality of nature, which is reflected back in our own being. And so many people today make the assumption that health is simply the absence of disease, as Penny brought up in her introduction. I think that one of the issues that we face in terms of actually even understanding health today is that many of us suffer from such poor health and have just become so used to a state of chronic dis-ease that it's very rare to actually meet someone who is robustly healthy. And this has many factors, including social circumstances, economic circumstances, and so on and so on. And all of that has to be factored in when we're thinking about where a person is at and how they can actually get better and arrive at a state of a full expression of their physical being, a full expression of their psycho-emotional being. And a further consequence is that many people basically believe in a kind of unconscious way that they're healthy unless they're told otherwise by a doctor who gives a diagnosis of some physical pathology or other. And one of the problems with this conception of health is that it assumes that we're comprised only of a physical body, which, as we have already discussed, is not the case, and that it's only physical afflictions that make us ill. And this view is held onto with such unconscious, and we can also say unconscionable resolve, that we've gotten ourselves stuck in a kind of morass of materialist reductionism. I just want to read a quote here from Martin Miles, who's a homeopath, but the comment is very revealing. He says, "We've arrived in a situation," oh, sorry, the screen share made my notes vanish.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We've arrived at a situation where, and here I'm quoting, where the spirit has descended and been crucified upon a cross of matter, and that this usually amounts to being plunged into the overwhelming darkness of earthly life. The contact with the spirit is lost, and many are drowned in the sea of materialism, unaware of why they came here in the first place. And this deep sense of meaninglessness that has pervaded so many people's lives today is really one of the central problems that we're facing, not only as herbalists, but in many of the health professions, a pervading sense of meaninglessness and loss of orientation in the world, which has deep consequences in terms of the manifestations of disease and also the kind of epigenetic resonance that the disease process can have, because disease tendencies are heritable. We pass certain traits on. And this is obvious when we consider certain kinds of diseases that will run in a family, for example. And probably everyone can think of examples either from their own lives or from lives of people that they know. And we've reached the point where even psycho-emotional conditions tend to be understood on a purely material basis, right? We hear many things explained as chemical imbalances alone, right? Not that chemical imbalances they might be part of the picture, but that's not the whole scenario we're dealing with. Rudolf Steiner said that the most disastrous thing about our modern scientific view is that it thinks that every activity has to run its course entirely within the confines of the skin of the being in question. And so this is a distinctly modern reductionist view of existence. And when thinking in terms of medicine, this is the allopathic view of pathology, which doesn't take into consideration the genesis of disease in the vital body or the etheric body, doesn't take into consideration the genesis of disease in the emotions, in the mind, or the spirit. And without careful consideration of these dimensions of our individual and collective being, there's very little hope for any of us to understand what it actually means to be truly healthy. And this is why robust health is actually very rare to see today, because there's so much opposing its flourishing. Okay, just a few more comments here. So one of the things that we don't do as herbalists is we don't suppress disease, because when a disease is suppressed, it will inevitably re-emerge later in life, and often in a more virulent form. So the technical and concrete view of the body that I was just discussing is not open to the notion that the body is comprised of levels or layers. And to understand what this might look like, we can use terms, from different traditions. Steiner talked about the etheric body, the body of the life forces, the astral body, which provides sentience and consciousness, and the I organization, which is the self-aware, eternal spiritual part of the human being. And this process of disease suppression relates to the etheric body. And to suppress the disease is to create a kind of phantom image that gets stored in the etheric body, the vital body. And the etheric body is also the place where disease patterns that we have inherited from our parents and from generations before us are stored. And so, this is just some indication about what the view of holism entails, especially when we're thinking about what disease actually is, what a disease entity actually is.
Yeah, I'm always the first one to jump in, so I might as well just keep up Yeah, Victor, I really agree with you. And I see that on a really concrete level constantly in clinic. In one of the things that I work with is chronic infection. And so I'll see that, when they were 7, they had their tonsils taken out. When they were 18, they had their appendix taken out. In between that period of time, there were multiple uses of antibiotics. Then in their 20s, there was a series of urinary tract infections, more antibiotics. Then there were the teeth infections that started up. And by the time they come to the herbalist, they're in a systemic infection where they have chronic pain, brain fog, they're not sleeping, or they're sleeping, there's extreme fatigue. And so, it's like the infection is continuously suppressed as opposed to actually being treated, and the body isn't taken care of. It's like, kill the infection, but don't take care of the body and don't take care of the mind. And certainly don't look at the reason why the infections took hold of the body in the first place. Mm-hmm. So I just on a concrete level, I see that continuously in clinic. Yeah. Yeah, Marianne?
Yeah, so I just wanted to add that there's this thing that I hear with some modalities or some practitioners where they say, well, we're only going to use this one item so we know whether that's the thing that's going to work, right? And to me, I think, why would you do that? Why would you slow things down to wait and to see if that one thing works, when really we have to do many things to be well in a day? We have to eat well, we have to have some exercise and fresh air and good sleep and hydrated, and there's all these things that we have to do to be well, to address ourselves as a whole. So to reduce everything down to one thing that's very allopathic and very it's like the doctor's approach, the medical approach, the heroic approach is here's that miracle thing that's going to address that issue. And I think in holism, kind of what both you were going to have said is that we have to address the multiple layers of the person and utilize everything that we have.
Yeah, and I think that the justification for the allopathic philosophy of convenience, which is throw antibiotics at it because it's, you know, it's convenient. People don't have the time to actually get well. You know, when you tell someone, well, you know, you've been dealing with these conditions for many years now, maybe even decades. It's going to take a long time for things to get better, but slowly and surely we have to be patient and work with the body as it is allowing us to work at different levels and different layers. And another thing that the allopathic approach fails to do is to respect the integrity of the organism, right? And the allopathic medicine uses the language of side effects, but there are no side effects, there are effects. And a medicine or a drug affects the organism, and it affects the integrity of the organism. And if that's not taken into consideration, we're not dealing with holistic medicine. We're dealing with a philosophy of so-called convenience.
The allopathic system also uses the language of war. Like, how often do we hear, like, we're going to battle this and fight for cancer and blah, blah, blah. It's like.
Exactly.
Okay, whew, okay, that's heavy. Let's, Penny wants to add something.
Do we have time?
Yep.
Do we have time?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
great. I was going to say, one time I was at a conference once with, there was a lot of medical doctors, and I was sitting with this one medical doctor from Edmonton, and I said to him, why don't you, you know, treat your patients preventatively and start looking at them like a whole person and understand, you know, where their weaknesses are and help build them. And he was like, oh, Penny, you're so naive. For us to get paid, we have to diagnose you. So modern medicine is not about the whole person. It's just about diagnosing something so that they can get paid. Whereas in ancient medicine, the physician or the healer got paid when keeping the person well. So like the goal was the person is well, that's when you're a healer, when that person is never getting ill because you're taking such good care of them. So we've got it backwards in our society.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of my tax dollars. Anyways, okay, so Tamara, let's.
All right, so I just feel like we could talk about this for so long. I'm enjoying it so much, what everybody's saying, and I thought of so many things to say in response, and then I thought, okay, I'm just gonna speak my piece. But since Penny was the last to speak, just a little response to that one that came to mind is that, you know, I find myself, and I think we all can say that we often find ourselves in a situation where our role will be largely to offer the support that comes from some of that damage, some of those side effects and such, when people need to use the allopathic system. And there are certain times where it can be really, really helpful, and you know, it has its place, but there is often this situation where, you know, certainly the integrity of the person, the whole person, is not being taken into account, and the effects, the side effects, whatever, the things that happen linger. And so then that's where the herbalist steps in and tries to restore wholeness, or maybe to establish wholeness that stays throughout the duration of whatever treatment that they're going through. A lot of times we do that with cancer treatments, for example. Anyway, so what I was going to talk about on a different note was looking at holism from the perspective of looking at nature and plants and trees and how they behave, with parallels to our bodies and the way that it behaves, and our bodies and our minds and, you know, our holistic selves. So as my example specimen, I was going to talk about prickly ash, the prickly ash tree, which is a herb that I really, really bring into my practice a lot. And I just get so much delight from it. And it grows here where I live. And so prickly ash, I guess, I was going to show you a picture maybe. Prickly ash is, there it is. It's prickly, it's a shrub, and it grows in really dense masses. Around here, because we have a lot of farmland, it grows in the tree lines between the fields, and you'll also find it at the edges of forests. And these thin channels of forests where, you know, there's sunny spots on both sides. That's where it likes to grow. And also on like old fields that are starting to grow in, they've gone fallow and it's 50 years, the first trees that'll start to come up. And it never gets very tall, so eventually it probably gets overshadowed by some of the other trees as the whole area becomes woods. But it is there on the edge. It's on the edge of the woods. And so when you've got these farmlands and then you've got these tree lines, they're basically like these channels of life that are moving through, carrying with all these root systems of trees, all these mycelia, a lot of moisture, a lot of different nutrients has the opportunity to move through these systems. We know more and more that trees communicate with each other through their root systems and their mycelia. And this is a system of communication that they have while their roots get broken up when there's, you know, bigger open field space. So forests can be connected to each other. Wildlands can be connected to each other with these tree lines, and wildlife will use them to be able to have a protected area that they can move through. And so I sort of think of these tree lines as channels that are kind of like blood vessels, and they are carrying all the life force. They're carrying so many different inputs that are feeding communication with all of the land, water and moisture and nutrients within all of the land. You know, something that's really important in order to allow a regular flow and therefore health. So they're like currents, they're like channels, and so are our blood vessels. And the prickly ash grows on the periphery of that, and it creates this protective area because it's super thorny. And so it grows in thick mats. So if you're out walking and you get to this tree line of prickly ash, like, you're gonna stop and say, I don't think I'm gonna go in there. And bigger animals won't either. But smaller animals have a safe space that they can travel through, and also some food, because these are the berries, which are edible. Now, if we eat one of these berries, and when I have students that I can give an opportunity to taste these fresh, I always do, just eat one, and then let it hang out in your mouth and notice the tingling effect. It will start to really, really tingle, and it'll feel warm. And this is showing us in our mouth, this little microcosm of our mouth, what this herb will do within the body. Within the body, this is an important herb to support the channels of our blood vessels. It will help to encourage the flow of blood throughout the whole circulation. It can be really helpful when there's, you know, you've got poor peripheral circulation and such. It can be really helpful to move stagnancy when there's pain and inflammation somewhere, to help move that along. And also where the blood connects to the nerves, the body's communication system, it's gonna get involved and help to support flow and interaction there. And not only this, but in the same way that the prickly ash forms this protective barrier around the woods, which are really precious because there's this important system of life force with a really different ecosystem on both sides. And there's opportunity for lots of little bits of damage to ruin them. So they keep this thick mat of protection, and they protect the animals that are in there, and they protect the land and the soil that's holding a forest ecosystem with all its important parts. And prickly ash has this important protective effect on our blood vessels as well. It is a citrus family plant, and it tastes like citrus and smells like citrus, which is really uplifting and energizing, if you can think of that. It has some, I believe it has some limonene, or one of those lemon essential oils, volatile oils in it that give it its aroma. And that has a cooling effect on the body. However, prickly ash is also pretty stimulating, and it can also have a warming effect on the body. So it will kind of work in either way, depending on what's needed in the body. And in that sense, it's working holistically with you where you're at. But it will protect the integrity of those blood vessels so that they can't get damaged by all kinds of, you know, free radicals and or viruses or anything that's trying to get in there. It'll allow them to be strong and supportive. There will be less likelihood that they will pool and create something like, varicose veins, hemorrhoids, less likely that they'll build up an inflammation by a fullness of blood flow. There will be a good, healthy flow of the circulation, which will support nourishment throughout the body. It could specifically support circulatory issues if you need them, but it can also just help to be a delivery mechanism for other herbs that you're taking for other issues in the body by carrying those herbs throughout the entire circulation so that they will go wherever they need or everywhere if that's where they need to be. So we really see a lot of these parallels in the prickly ash tree and the way that it grows and the life that it's supporting, and then the body, and particularly through the circulation, and then by relationship also to the nerves. It's a really, really important remedy to help restore nerve function when it has been damaged. And I think a big part of that is because of its work in the circulatory system. So I don't know if I've gone over time or if I should keep talking.
20 seconds.
Maybe it's 20 seconds. Well, I think I'm pretty much there. I had the feeling. I didn't get the 2 minutes warning. I didn't see it.
Yeah.
It didn't work. Okay. Anyways, so that's what I gotta say. Any thoughts?
Beautiful. Fantastic. Anyone have anything to share?
Yeah, I mean, it just made me think, your description made me think about how external natural processes, so-called external natural processes, are really mirrored back and internalized within our own being. And you gave a really great description of how prickly ash interfaces with the dynamic totality of our own being. Yeah, I mean, one thing I love about prickly ash, I've used it a lot treating myself actually, is that it helps rebalance the charge on the nerves. So I've used it for treating vertigo, and it's been very helpful. It's a really, really wonderful herb.
Yeah. Yeah, I use it. It's like one of my all-time favorite herbs too. Oh, Penny, go ahead. Penny.
Okay, I was going to say, I loved the way you described that as the body, because I was thinking here, living on my farm, I have all kinds of old fence rows, and the way you were describing it, and I have a bush at the back, and I'm envisioning the blood flow, from my back forest coming down here by the pond, and I'm part of it. I am like a little cell floating around on this land all the time doing my little thing. And it's like, that is so cool to me, to think how we have to remember we're just part of the bigger picture and the bigger body. We're just a little part. We're not all, that and a bag of potato chips too. We're just that little thing that's here. And that was really great how you brought that forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I like that imagery of you seeing yourself as part of the whole there on your land.
Yeah. So Penny, do you want to carry on?
Oh, okay. Sure. So thank you for this opportunity. So when we discussed, we really didn't discuss what we were doing. We got the topic, and I was kind of like, what's a holistic approach? So I was thinking how in life, some people move through life kind of willy-nilly, like on the wind, and just whatever happens, they go. I'm not that way. I have goals, and I have, boom, I'm doing this. So I have thought my goal in life is to become a wise woman, a wise old woman. And I see a holistic life as that. It's a wise life. And if you can live a life that will be better by looking at it with the big picture, not looking small, but looking big, and living the life wholly and being aware of my impact and my actions on the world as well. And I feel that the holistic approach is totally about your body, mind, and spirit. And it can transform our health and our well-being. It can make us more patient and more understanding, more awake as a person in our day-to-day life. And that, I think, is something we should strive for. And just to pay attention, to be awake and see what's happening with the person around us. And I also think that there's certain pillars that we have to look at that make us whole. So what we eat, for example, ensuring that we're eating mostly vegetables. And if you choose to be a meat eater or not, that's your preference. But definitely to remember to eat our vegetables. And this time of year, if you have any property or if your neighbors have a little garden, people share food so much this time of year. And if you have a gardening friend or join even a gardening club, there'll be so many greens out there. You'll have smoothies coming out your ears. It's great. And just to really remember again about having those different species of plants as to what we're supposed to be eating for good health. So good health isn't just eating 5 vegetables that you eat all the time in rotation. It should be eating 30 different vegetables in rotation, and getting them while they're in season is a really brilliant thing. And for people to be aware of intermittent fasting, eating, you know, we were not designed to eat 24/7, 3 meals a day. And it's kind of, when you stop and think about it, it's a little bit gluttonous when, you know, if you think about it, because it's constant. And I know sometimes, like, my husband likes to eat 3 times a day, and I'll be like, I'm not even hungry. Like, when was the last time your stomach is actually rumbling out of hunger? Sometimes we just eat and we don't even realize we're not necessarily even hungry. And in those times of not eating, our bodies have a chance to do all kinds of other work that really needs to be done, important work, instead of just working on constant digestion of food. So it's important to just stop and think about that. Even if once a week you plan to miss a meal, and, you know, think about it and know that this is the break you're giving your body, so your body can go do something, some other important work. And even ask your body to go do that, you know, go do that other important work right now. You're gifting it, it's time. And I think it's important to remember that we have to move. And not everyone is an athlete. I am not an athlete whatsoever. My biggest thing is that I love to walk, and I do love yoga. But walking is my thing. So, you know, even if you can just walk for half an hour a day, that's wonderful. At least you're moving. If you're gardening, even sitting, sit on the floor sometimes. Don't always sit in a chair. Just do these other things that are mindful, just to keep yourself moving. And we really are supposed to do half an hour a day. And I have this friend, Dr. Dennis Wilson. He's pretty hilarious. He's wrote a book on this new exercise where he's saying you do, shoot, what's it called? Oh God, I should know his book. Anyway, I can't think of it. You do things really fast. Boom, 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 boom. So if you're sitting at your typewriter working and you're at a desk, if you just stop for a moment and do this explosive da-da-da-da-da-da for as long as you can, that gets things really moving in your body. It's amazing. So think of these little things, maybe during a commercial if you're watching TV. Just do these little things to get moving. And our sleep. Remember, we really are supposed to get 7 to 8.5 hours sleep. And if you are not sleeping well, that's a real problem. So even remember to think of our herbs that are our friends, some chamomile, some lavender, lemon balm. Thank you. And, you know, start drinking our teas at night, and know that our sleep, and to practice good sleep hygiene, is so important. And then, of course, our thought process is really crucial. So take some herbs and drink teas for our mind, and to do puzzles and learning, like you guys are listening now tonight. This is really great for your mind. Your emotional health, to remember we did a whole talk on adrenals and the endocrine system, which is great for our emotional health. So remember to take time to have herbs for that in your teas. And also connect with people. This has been a really difficult time because people are not touching and loving and being close. We can connect like this, which is great, but it's not how we're meant to connect. We are meant to be together and at Herbal Gathering. So when that's allowed again, will be great, but I think it's next year. But it's so important to come together. And so to remember to make efforts to come together. And I also want to remind everyone about detoxing. It's really important. Our bodies sometimes are so overloaded and overburdened that for this wonderful, amazing body of ours to work, we need to sometimes give it a break and clean it. And to remember that balance is the key. And so my biggest balancer in life, and I think for everybody, I would recommend nature. Nature is my biggest, I wanted to use the word prescribe, I don't like that word. My biggest thing that I would say for your health that we need to include more of: touching the soil, sitting on the grass, bare feet, outside. Enjoy it while we have this beautiful summer. So again, remember balance in our lives. And thank you so very much.
Okay, so that's our first pop-up. Our next pop-up, I think, is, does anyone know? Anyone know? Is it, I think our next one is roses. Are we talking about roses? Can't remember. Anyone? Quick.
July 8th, maybe?
July 14th, I think.
The 14th of July. And what's the topic?
The rose.
The rose. Who doesn't love a rose? Okay, so watch out for that. We'll have it posted up on the Facebook page, Herbalists on Herbs, or Herbalists and Herbs. And watch for it, and we'll see you then. Oh, and Victor, do you want to just say something about the video?
Yeah, the video will be up on YouTube very soon.
And we'll share it on that Facebook page too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so we have a YouTube page. So if you're not on Facebook, you can search Herbalists and Herbs YouTube, and it should come up. Yeah, and all of the pop-up webinars will be available on there. And the webinar series that we're going to be doing starting in September will be a paid subscription series. And for those who are interested in certain topics but can't attend the night of, those will also be available to anyone who signs up.
Yeah, so, and our website, our new website too, so we've been busy, is Herbalists on Herbs. So Google us and you'll find us, and you'll be able to check us out and see what we're talking about. And we're also interested in a dialogue with you. So let us know what you think, what you want to hear. If you have something, you want to share insight into some of the topics we're talking about, please, you're welcome to on all those different mediums. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a good night. Have fun. We forgot to talk about fun as part of holistic health. Fun is a big thing.
We started with
Start with dancing with your, go out dance with your tomatoes tonight. See what happens.
Bye.